Excellent. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. And exactly as we're welcoming our friend Joost, we're starting the recording for this Friday chat. So it's been a little while, and it's a Friday chat on Saturday. So the whole idea, we're exchanging with one of our star guests, Michael, Anthony, Mark Hager, special star guest for today. So guys, how have you been?
Good.
Life's good.
Life is good. Mark, you've been traveling a little bit, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been traveling now that the flights are on and we're allowed to travel between the borders in Australia. Yeah, I've been doing a little bit of coaching, getting around each one of the states to have a look at all the junior young kids around the place.
Excellent. So do we do a quick introduction, guys, or are you all happy and people will have to look at watch the other videos and see who you are? Otherwise, we're just getting into with Mark, and well, very interesting subject, which is the current state of young players in Australia, because I know that in Europe, young players is a little bit of a challenge at the moment. It's more young players like under 18 and so on. Under 16 has been quite okay, in at least in France. Under 19 has been a little bit more challenging. So how is it on your end, Mark?
Yeah, so I've only been in the new job. I moved back to Australia in January. So I haven't seen a lot of Australian hockey or juniors for 13 years, I would say. So it was interesting coming back into it and having a look around. And probably the last month or so, I've been able to travel to each of the centres. That we have what we call a futures group here, which is our under 18s. And we were due to hold a camp in Canberra where 38 female and 38 male, basically juniors, come into the one centre, and we hold it for a week. And we give them specialist coaching, some tactical stuff, some theory, and some learnings around wellbeing also. But unfortunately, that didn't come to fruition because of the pandemic and the COVID. So Mark Knowles, who runs the boys' side, and I run the ladies' side, we travelled around to each of the centres and worked with smaller groups, which was quite enjoyable. So we ended up going to, I think we've got still 2 states to go to, South Australia and WA, but we've been to the rest and pretty much just did some goal scoring technique. Knowlesy, because he's a good defensive player and a good tackler, he worked with that. And just recently we had a series on the Gold Coast where we had our 2 basically under 21 teams on the men and women and an overage group. And it's interesting, I suppose the biggest thing is a lot of these kids haven't played hockey for 2 years at a national championships or a competitive type program for the 2 years because of the pandemic. So, you know, we invited 22-year-olds who have missed out probably on the under 21 age over the last 2 years. So they also came along, and from that we picked our new national junior squad. And our national development squads were picked post that series. Lots to like. Typical Australia, lots of forwards, lots of people who can score goals, lots of players who want to take people on, lots of flair, which was very exciting to see, and some really good defenders coming through as well. And we've got some good quality goalkeepers. But I suppose our biggest areas of concern, not concern, but where we have to target is drag flicking. That's something that we want to get going in our junior age groups. So when they do hit the senior ranks, we're not coaching them then. We're starting at a younger age. Goal scoring has been identified as a key area for Australian hockey to continue to work on. And the drag flicking and the goalkeeping is another area. We want to have some good quality keepers, because if you think of the women's side, there's been some good quality keepers there, but now, you know, a couple have moved on through retirements or moved on. So it's getting that new group to come along. And, you know, we've missed a cycle, or we've missed a couple of years where we haven't had, well, we're not going to the Women's Junior World Cup in South Africa, which is played shortly. And our men didn't go to India either for the Men's Junior World Cup. So where we sit on the world stage is a little bit of an unknown at this stage. But yeah, there's some very good kids to work with there.
Excellent. So I was wondering, so you mentioned a few skills areas, I would say. Okay, drag flicking, goal scoring. I don't know if goal scoring is about skills or more about mentality or attitude. But it's a lot around the techniques. What did you find? What did you find kind of evolved? Did the guys miss out on just game understanding, on skills, game understanding, or general attitude? You talked about well-being. What do you think are out of those areas? Maybe I missed some of them, but what are the key areas you think that the COVID had really an impact on?
What we're trying to do. Yeah, so Charles, what we're trying to do is we're trying to, I suppose, Mark Knowles and my role, our official title is Technical Pathway Tactical Coaches. So we're the link between the national coaches and all the state coaches around Australia, which probably hasn't been there for a while. So anything that the national programs are doing, they're passing on to Mark Knowles and myself, which we then pass down to the junior coaches and the junior players. So they have an understanding of when they do go to say a hockey ruse or a Kookaburra camp, they already got an understanding of what structures they're trying to play, what skills they're looking for. So when they walk in, they're not, it's not overawed or geez, I never learnt that, or I don't understand this. There'll be little things that they won't understand, but we're trying to bridge that gap. So when the young players move up, that it's an easier transition for them. I think that's the real key. It's interesting you talk about is it a mental thing, goal scoring? Yeah, it is. One of the things I noticed with the ladies is they'll be 8 yards, 7 yards out, and I find that a lot of the ladies will try and tend to push at goal versus move their feet quickly, short handle, or getting a quality, harder, firmer shot, accurate shot going away. So that's something that we're really trying to focus in on, is when you create your own time to get a quality shot and more powerful versus just a push shot at goal. As you know, we don't tend to play a lot of indoor over here. So our push shots probably aren't as potent as some of these. If I look at Germany, in one instinct, some of their players from 10 yards out can really scoop or flick a ball with a hell of a lot of power and accuracy. But because we probably don't play indoor, a lot of indoor, or it's more of a recreational sport for Australia, we're missing that ability. Also, on the goal scoring, same thing, as we're trying to, our national goalkeeping coach, Dave Staniforth, is assisting us with, again, feeding the information down the type of goalkeeper the national program are looking out for. Again, the set piece, PCD calls, all that sort of thing. So again, the transition's quite simple for us. And the drag flicking, I just think it's something that I think we've allowed to just go along. And you see boys, because of their strength, they tend to create their own power and their own technique without a lot of coaching. And I think the girls have been the same way. And that's probably something, when I have asked what's around the country with drag flicking with the ladies, there's very minimal. Like, we're not talking 20, 30 type numbers. We're talking 5, 6, 7 in all age groups, which is, that's a real focus for us. And if you look at the last few Olympics and the teams that have won, they've all got quality drag flickers. And I probably even reflect on my time with GB. Is our last 2 games is Grace Ballston stepped up. She ripped one high left of the keeper in the quarterfinal, and in the bronze medal playoff, she ripped one straight through the legs of the Indian goalkeeper, which basically won us the games. So it just highlights from that point of view why we are really focused in trying to improve the drag flickers, or the number of people we have, and get them to world class, not just being able to push at the net. It's getting them world class.
So the drag flicking has been quite a question in Australia, more on the boys, because I don't know if you remember, but back in was it 2014 or 10? Maybe that was 2010, where Australia had an infamous game, men's had an infamous game against GB, or was it England or GB, and had something like 12 short corners and didn't score a single one. And Richard was really against the concept of short corners, and then he brought Chris Ciriello. So I thought that in the Australian culture, Dragflicking had come in as not natural, but as a de facto skills that you need to have to be a hockey player in the Australian teams. Is it not much the case yet? Is it the acquired
I think
this kind of a thing?
On the men's side, yep. Charles, I think there's enough. There's some really good quality drag men flickers coming through. But probably on the women's side, no, that's an area that we really have to focus in on and improve, and particularly the numbers. Like a lot of the ladies can flick, but we probably haven't, and it's our fault as coaches. We probably haven't utilised the specialist coaches out there enough to improve them. Like myself, I can coach it to a certain level, but I'm no expertise at picking. Oh, geez, I didn't pick that. Like we had Toon Seatman come over to GB to work with the English or the GB girls, and listening to him, and I'm just standing there in amazement, go, oh God, I would never have thought of that, or I didn't look at that, or I didn't see this. And so from that point of view, I think we need to get drag flicking coaches who coach it really well in our programs.
So you mentioned the difference between the boys and the girls, and that's something that maybe Michael, Anthony, you want to comment here. But we did have the masterclass about goal scoring and about short corners, and we noticed there was a difference. You mentioned the physicality where the boys could create their own power because of the way the physicality of the boys compared to the girls. So is it really something that you're seeing as well as a very different challenge between the boys and the girls?
Yeah, I'll comment on this. I think as coaches, we're responsible for an under expectation of the women being able to do it as well as the men. That they might not quite get the same speed, but they should equally be as good as the men from a pure technical point of view and deliver quite good flicking. If I go back to a young Georgie Morgan flicking better than, Blake Govers at the same age. Blake Govers flicks the ball quite hard. I wouldn't say he was good, but he flicks it quite hard. But that was destroyed by coaches who really destroyed her. And I think as coaches, we do that quite a lot with players in all sorts of areas, not only drag flicking. But we might see an unusual kid that's a really good goal scorer, but is a bit annoying in lots of ways. We would tend to coach that out of them as opposed to actually let them have a go and keep playing, the way they play to be a good goal scorer. And I think the expectation for women has to be that you can flick as well as the men. And we've got to have that attitude as a starting point before we go anywhere with around techniques. We've got to say to them, get on the field and rip it as hard as you possibly can. Yeah. It has to be that sort of attitude first, and then you develop that technique as you go along, like Mark says, with specialists in the area.
Yeah, I mean, it's Mark said, more specialist coaching in drag flicking. I mean, I think Georgie Morgan's a really good example. She got her technique coached back out of her, and she was a good drag flicker when she first started. Sometimes the coaches, I mean, I'm not a good drag flicker specialist by any means, and then when Sandeep Singh turned up, and then I've gone, oh my God, I didn't realise that. So, I think specialist drag flickers are really critical, especially for the young ones in terms of technique, because you can damage yourself if you've got a really poor technique. And that's what initially happened in drag flicking when it first started coming about, is that there were a lot of knee injuries simply because of the technique. But if you don't score penalty corners, you don't win major titles. You got to have it. So
it's an interesting point you make about the trying to rip it as hard as you can and the power as well. Do you think that's the most important thing, or do you think learning deception early on is more important?
Oh, it's a bit of both, right? But women, in my view, tend to be, I call it athletically conservative. So they don't want to stand out as much. And so you want to encourage them to flick it hard. right? You can develop the skills around some deception and things like that as you go along. But it's a bit like cricket and fast bowling. You want young fast bowlers just to bowl fast. Then you worry about the control mechanisms you might and the skill you might develop as you go along. It's a similar principle that you've got to have in place. So you've got to somehow get that athletic conservatism out of the girls and just say, just stand there and do as hard as you possibly can for a start and adjust from there in the way you're going to do it. So they can have confidence in being able to do it.
I think if you look at Matla from Holland at the moment, yeah, she can rip it. She's got good technique, but she can rip it. And I think someone like Grace Ballston for GB is another one who can really rip it. And Giselle Ainsley also has got long levers. Also, when she gets onto one, she can rip it. So that they have the capabilities. I remember a coach many years ago saying that the ladies can't drag flick. Well, I think it was 4 years later, Korea had a drag flicker that was #1 in the world at drag flicking. So it just shows you, if you spend the time, that physically, I think they're getting better and better, the ladies, and they're getting stronger, and their technique's getting better and better. And also, I look at the women's game now, and you're now seeing 40, 50 metre aerials, whereas you wouldn't have seen that probably 4 or 5 years ago. So they are catching up to the men. They're just a little bit behind because we haven't given that coaching time to the ladies as probably what we have with the men.
And when are they learning? Do you reckon, are you saying that maybe they should start learning a little bit earlier?
Yeah, I think so. What age? I'm unsure. But I mean, to be able to throw a little aerial ball, 10 yards, 15 yards, I think a 16-year-old should be able to do that with ease if we teach them properly. And a lot of the girls, unfortunately, we're probably not teaching that. This is my naivety, is I'm not sure of the rules at the junior age. Do we allow aerial balls at junior hockey, or do we not? Therefore, the kids aren't going to practice it. So it's probably stifling a little bit of learning through that period. But I can also understand it because of the danger factor as well. What age do we start to develop it or bring it into their hockey?
Yep.
Yeah, I'm seeing some under 14 that definitely have the skills, but not with drag flicking or scooping or.
Well, a lot of the kids just want to do tomahawks. Just stand there and build the shit.
They're not even getting taught.
I know.
Excellent. So, yeah, Michael, go for it.
Can I ask something?
Yes,
yeah,
yours. Go for it.
Introduce yourself, Just.
I'm Just. I'm very skeptical always, so that's me. No, I like, of course, I like drag flicking, but I'm a bigger fan of variations, not like the drag flicking style. But of course, if you have a drag flick, they don't know when they run out what is gonna happen. So I think it's really important to have good drag flicking players. But I think when you have good drag flicking players, why they play so less variation? Because I know the answer. Some people here say, yeah, because they have drag flicking players and they have a lot of course. But if you play variations and they think you play drag flicking and maybe they walk with 2 players out, there are much more space to play your variations and to win easily and to make goals. But I don't get it. I'm coaching a lot, but I really don't get it.
Yeah, but one thing. Go on, Mark. Go on.
I was going to say, in the women's game, I think, yeah.
We talk about women's, in my opinion, in this way.
Yes, yeah. Women, I think women's game do a lot of variations. Like if you look at the playbook that we had for our penalty corners, we probably had about 10, 12 different variations we would run off either our flickers or our hitters. I think hitting is also a skill that we don't use enough.
Not anymore.
No,
I agree.
I think some teams do. And if I look at Olivia Mary from New Zealand, she can hit a corner. And that was their #1 strength. Now, what happened there was, I suppose, at the Olympics, is teams worked her out. First runners get better. The goalkeeper comes out a little bit further to cut the angles down.
Yeah.
But I know
they
in the women's
do this.
game, because I had a men's coach coach a ladies game, or he came to a few training sessions, and he goes, God, you guys have so many variations on your penalty corners. And in the men's game, you're lucky if you got 3. They've probably got a playbook of 10, but most of the time they're just flicking.
Yeah, but the thing is, I can imagine if New Zealand, you said, if New Zealand has the best shot corner, like hitting corner, not the drag flicking corner, they already know. But why, if you have good quality drag flicking, you don't play variation sometimes? Because it's nobody expected, and then it gives you much more space and much more possibilities. Because if you play against maybe 2, it's not 4 people are running, or 2 are running, 2 are standing, but the first 2 are away after the first pass.
I think I agree with Mark here. At international level, the women's teams do have a lot of variations because they don't have the flickers like the men. If you go down the men's list, every team will have 1 or 2 or 3 people that can flick the ball quite well, and they would rest on a success rate of maybe 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 or something like that over time that they would go on. And some of those men's teams, you see them with a variation and they fail on the variations because they just haven't practiced them enough. They're not very good at them. Where the women's teams are reasonably good at variations. The other thing about variations is it comes down to execution of skill under pressure, and how many of the players in your team, you've got to answer this question, are good enough to execute the skill under pressure. At the top level, you'd expect all of them, but the reality of that is you probably are going to struggle to find that in all teams, even in the top 10.
But that is always, that's also because of the training, because everybody is like, hallelujah, we have drag flicking players, but you can also say, let's train under pressure.
And
sure, you can. Sure.
On there, that's a fantastic conversation, because that's the one that Richard was really made a big hoo-ha on. But what I suggest, because we're good for time for today, so we'll finish on this. There is a masterclass next week with Mark Hager. So guys, connect, and we'll chat very soon.